intersection or things that are in the queue would just naturally fall over, roll over to 2019 for completion?
Well, that's a great question, because would that fall behind some of the new initiatives that we're discussing here, or where would that go? So at least a discussion on that, I think, would be in order, and also it's so timely. Look at our neighbors to the south, so our neighbors to the north, well, we'll push aside Michigan for a second, but Canada, the whole country, has legalized, and then our neighbors to the south in Illinois have the most inclusive form of legalization, including expunging. I think it was over 800,000 criminal records from residents. So yeah, I'd say it's rather timely. And then, it's so hard to whittle down the last one, but I think I like the TIF policy, the TIF-TID policy. Sure, I'd go with that. I think that's also a really that will be a robust discussion. And I'd pick more if we weren't limited to 5.
I'm assuming that some of these basic, like, solar energy installations on the municipal buildings, some really common sense, are already inclusive. So the list I had was historic preservation, begin the research and community discussion on that, and spend some time exploring with the community where we would want to go as a community. On learning racism, I think that's a really worthwhile effort.
Ooh, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take the marijuana off because it's already in the queue, so it's not really a board priority, and I'd like the unlearning racism as my fifth.
I had to implement the Hubbard Parkland Management Plan. 4th was the canoe, kayak, and rail project. And the 5th was update park ordinances. I kind of focused on parks and some parks liaison. Try to get wrap that piece up. Yeah.
We're just going on the table of your 5 priorities.
Of the village board.
Of the village board initiatives.
Oh, just the village board?
Yes.
Okay, historic preservation, wait, let me just flip to that page, just in case because I had agenda management or document management, but that's not.
Well,
Yeah, that's
that can be one.
It can?
Yeah.
Okay, so those two,
So historic preservation and then agenda management?
actually agenda management and then historic preservation.
Okay.
And then, where am I? Hold on for 1 second. Just want to make sure I saw them. Okay, and then I had, capital budget and so the solar neighborhood loan program, is that not?
I think that's is that in consideration?
Yeah. So we can do that one, okay, and then what about, TIF policy?
That can be one of them, that's in those.
How many is that, 4?
That's 4.
Okay, good. And then the, where'd it go?
When you said capital budget, did you mean the capital facilities plan?
What was the one that David had proposed?
Capital facilities plan?
Yeah.
Capital budget, yeah.
Okay, I think they're kind of the same
Or a
thing.
facility plan, yeah.
Gosh darn it.
Did you want your budget committee?
Yep, that's the one I wanted.
It's on there.
Yep. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, no. The welcoming ordinance. Forgot that.
So it looks like
So-
historic preservation.
TID policy,
Mhm.
agenda management, and historic preservation are your top 3.
Yeah.
The other one coming in with 3,
Wait, TID policy,
TID
historic,
policy.
what was the third?
strategic planning, I'm sorry, for, short, I just put TID policy, but for the strategic planning and TID policy, historic preservation, agenda management,
Is agenda management and document management?
yes. And then the next one up having 3 was unlearning racism, it has a fourth, if Jessica, you mentioned diverse and inclusive workforce training.
Yes, that is what I'm,
So you were talking about unlearning racism,
Yeah.
okay, so you guys have four right off the bat that are,
Can I just ask a question about that? Under, the Human Relations Commission, there's something called, wording for hiring practices, something about hiring, is it the same thing?
No, not necessarily,
Okay.
when we met, is this a good time to,
Oh, thank you.
Rebecca and Rachel and I met, last week just to take the feedback of the board and try to define a scope of what we thought would be manageable in a year one, given what the needs are. And so the thought was really to put the emphasis on getting kind of a baseline of like an overall kind of mission statement of the equity, diversity and inclusion statement policy that then committees can decide how they wanna apply that. So it'd be hard to just like go in and start looking at hiring practices, not knowing kind of what, where the organization is going or kind of the context of that. And so, and it also is aligning with the library's initiative to develop a policy as well. So we just thought that was a nice way of kind of leveraging resources and intent.
The only reason I ask is I know there's 4 subgroups in the HRC, and including one, which is the education part. How does that?
This doesn't, right, HRC could still do their initiatives that they, as time allows.
Okay.
And just to clarify part, I think last time that question came up and the response was that the HRC would more focus on the community, while this initiative would focus more on staff and committees. Is that still a correct general
And then-
summary of that?
Right, and the HRC providing them with kind of a baseline to start with, because they asked for that, so they're all speaking the same language
Yes.
and just coming from it.
Correct, okay, I just wanna make sure we're still on the same page there.
Exactly.
Great.
And then they could take that and integrate it into their work and,
And how does it fit with the welcoming ordinance? I see here it says like, recommendations for mission statement on diversity and inclusion, and
I think it would make it even better.
so give us our top 4.
top four. So the next one, thank you, Jessica, that came into, so the next one that had 2 people, at least 2 of you commenting on, were, 2 people voiced implement management resource plan for Hubbard Park. 2 people, requested open records request cost procedures.
2 people mentioned the capital.
And the capital budget, thank you.
for implementation, that's a good question. Like, whenever we do a study, do we have to rank that? Because when we do a study, you assume you're gonna implement it. Same thing with transportation. I mean, we're not ranking the implementation of the transportation study, but yet we're just not gonna end the study and put it on a shelf. So,
I think it's actually implementing portions of the plan that will come with a budgetary request associated with it, when you move in, because we don't have the resources in which to accomplish the implementation of the resource management plan. So it would need to be a conscientious choice from a budgetary perspective and then, a staff resource perspective.
so what's different about, say, transportation, we're gonna change striping, or we're gonna do angled parking somewhere, or, does that need to be an initiative to implement the plan?
Well, there will be specific, I'm presuming as we come to the conclusion of that plan, you will need to be specific in which ones and prioritize how you wanna go about the implementation of it.
And so the resource management plan has only one, or is it everything in that plan that will be implemented?
Mike, I'm gonna defer to you, because
Yeah,
the
I
plan's
don't-
not done yet.
Plan's not done yet, but it will be done. It's not like the
Right.
parking transportation that will be probably late, but the budget will already be done. This will occur we'll know more in August of what the proposal, what they're recommending. So this would be a placeholder that, once they've recorded, to move that along.
I agree, I mean, I think we definitely need to set aside some money because the transportation and planning transportation and parking study will be done November, correct? We'll have recommendations,
Yeah.
so we'll be talking about implementing those. Of course, we probably can't stripe and do things like that in the winter, but,
We could change the Duncan system, if we change the
Yeah.
permitting, you need money for that. I mean, there's gonna be, that's why I asked, just because we're gonna have some big ones coming up, that you
Yeah.
and then what do you do with them?
Sure. One, I mean, I think the traffic's, I mean, we're concluding the traffic study at the end of this year, so do we need to allocate an initiative for implementation of
Or is that
the
just
findings
budgeting?
for the traffic
Well, it's
study?
both, depending on what it is.
well, I mean, given that that was our initiative for this year and our primary
Mhm.
initiative, I don't think we're just gonna like drop it.
Mhm.
That's
Right
what-
when we actually have some answers,
Right.
we'll say, forget about them.
Yeah. I don't care. I think it makes sense that if the procedure is that we turn that into an initiative
Mhm.
on the spot here, so that it has a slot and,
Yeah.
and a fiscal space
Mhm.
for decision making, then I think we should take that action. And I don't know what procedurally we would do if somebody needs to make a motion or.
So that would be your fifth, transportation
But
and
how
parking,
many-
that's what I'm hearing.
It might be our number one, we'd have to go around the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, are you saying that, I mean, I guess my sort of question is to try to understand, like, what is the capacity, like, could staff do 5 initiatives from the board? Obviously depending on what those initiatives are, so if we added the implementation from the transportation and parking analysis, in addition to the top 4 that we've all kind of come to consensus on, is that reasonable, or do we need to then go back through and decide?
Great question. We are prepared on the top 4. Unlearning racism, there's budgetary considerations, those are identified in the handout that was, just passed out. What we are not prepared for, because it's an unknown, is transportation and parking. I don't know yet what that entails. Bart was very keen to kind of note, and quite frankly, I don't think that he will be an implementing agent of much of what comes out. He is the leader of this aspect of it. But depending on what area and what recommendations are proposed, then we would need to take a look at them to say, what does that forecast? I think it's really smart and thoughtful of this group to say, it means enough we just spent all this time, let's continue to watch it as we go through the budgetary process to see, you're not gonna implement a whole plan in 1 year. It's not the way plans work. But you're gonna pick those that are the highest priority or the lowest hanging fruit, or those that you feel make sense, and then we're only gonna need to come back and take a look at how we go about doing it.
We're not gonna have those answers, as Mike, trustee Maher just said, in August or ready for a budget. So what we used to do in the other government agencies that I worked in, we would, I'm assuming there's gonna need to be some Duncan changes, to our system. So we would just put a lump sum, because you don't wanna go a whole year without anything. So if the recommendations are more than that lump sum, then you figure it out as you go, you see if there's any reserves, but if they're less, then you at least have the money and you can always, it's in the budget. So like 50 grand, I don't know but just a pot of money where you would say, to start implementation, if there
If you
was
guys
a-
were willing to do that, we definitely would look at that option too.
I just don't
you
know what
know.
other way we'd do it.
Yeah, because it's just me sounding, it's me like being like, oh, I don't, cause this group tends to get more specific than that and wanting to know how those dollars, but that is definitely another approach.
But it sounds to me like it isn't just a financial, it is also
Oh, it's gonna be,
bandwidth and
you
the
bet.
capacity,
Yeah.
so.
But I don't know how to respond to you specifically,
Sure,
because I
right. Well,
don't
it's an
know.
unknown.
Right, that part, but to President Rosick's point, if you don't budget something,
Mhm.
then there's nothing to work with to get to the next step. Because I think what I find really refreshing about the group is that we're like, hey, we're gonna put this back, and we're gonna put it back in a better way than it was before, and move on to something else
Yeah.
for a period of time. So I think it really demonstrates your commitment to that. So what I'm hearing from the group are 5 things: TID policy, agenda management, historic preservation. To historic preservation, that's working through the educational process to determine what those outcomes may be, to kind of vet a bit. So we, as a village, there are some options for you as a board in terms of how to proceed with that.
Then so that would be for 2020 with sort of the understanding that for 2021, sort of like what we're doing with the
Right,
traffic
right.
study, that, you know, it sort of morphs into an initiative for 2021, that we have some placeholder for that.
And then the unlearning racism, which you have more detail in the handout before you, and then transportation and parking.
Can I just ask another question? We haven't even looked at committees or the administrations, yet. But I do remember in the meeting, when I was on the phone, the last meeting, it was discussed that historic preservation, if that was ranked high, which would be doing something to some of the administration's comprehensive plan, whatever. So I just wanna make sure, I know we're just taking board initiatives, I don't know how that's gonna play out from the input that was received from the administration on.
I'm seeing transportation and parking analysis
comp plan is huge.
implementation is one of the planning departments. So that's one, I mean, I'm just looking at these, like agenda management and open records are both Sarah, and it is a election year. So, I mean, TID policy, I don't know, is that Bart or you?
It's me. Bart will be joining for parts of it because it ultimately will impact some of the stuff for him later. But I'll be leaving.
CDA, right? He's going to CDA?
Yep, it'll be CDA and board. Everyone gets to be a part of it.
I mean, I think, yeah, I'm not, you know, again, we struggle with prioritization. Because yeah, some things like bocce courts or the, canoe kayak launch, you know, they're relatively like self-contained, building something in the built environment, as opposed to the management plan for Hubbard Park or open records or capital planning, you know, they're kind of different arenas. So